first visit in 5 years, Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in France, the first stop of his three-nation European tour. The trip will also take him to Serbia and Hungary, important partners of China in Central and Eastern Europe. In a signed article published on Sunday in the French newspaper Le Figaro, President Xi invoked Confucius and French writer Romain Rolland to highlight the importance of an independent foreign policy. It is so much easier to allow oneself to be guided, she quoted Rolland, than it is to think for oneself. This abdication is the kernel of the mischief, as Rolland said. The visit came on the heels of a major speech by French President Emmanuel Macron on the risks facing Europe. It also coincides with the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and France and the 75th anniversary of China-Hungary diplomacy. So why these three countries? What are the risks or mischief that Europe should worry about? And where does China fit in? Welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Paris, France, by Sébastien Drochon, Senior Fellow at Schiller Institute in France. From Shanghai, he's joining us at a very early hour, by the way. Thank you very much for that. From Shanghai, by Gary Rawson, CEO for Greater China of Accor, a French multinational hospitality company, and from Beijing by Jing Ling, Senior Research Fellow and Deputy Director of the Department for European Studies at China Institute of International Studies. Warmest welcome to all of you. So, the latest, President Xi has landed in France, and upon landing in Paris, he made a statement where he recalled his past state visits to France in 2014 and 2019, both in spring, and to celebrate the 50th and 55th anniversaries of diplomatic relations between China and with the people of France, he said. He also specifically said, and I quote, "As we celebrate the 60th anniversary of our diplomatic ties, I have a strong sense of déjà vu when setting foot again on the soil of your beautiful country. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I wish to take this opportunity to extend our warmest greetings and best wishes to the French government and the people." Mr. Drochon, let me start with you. It's quite an extraordinary message, or quite extraordinary messages in tone to me. Your impression?
Yeah. It's very important that Xi come to France to visit Macron and also to discuss very important topic. I think one of the main topic is the question of war, because we are in a situation of great tension, and I think if Xi Jinping is coming to France, Hungary, and Serbia, it's because he thinks that there is a possibility to have a good discussion to bring solutions on this question of the war in Ukraine, but also the war also in the Middle East. That is the main topic, I think, because of the situation urgency. So France and China, as Xi Jinping already said, and also there was the China-France Forum of Global Governance, where the former Prime Minister Laurent Fabius said that China and France are both countries that are defending multilateralism. And I think it's very important today to have this kind of dialogue between nations and to have dialogue to bring a real solution for peace, but also for political development, for economical development. So I think this meeting is very important, and we'll see what kind of solutions we'll bring.
Yeah, definitely a very highly anticipated visit, and more details caught our attention and the Chinese media's attention. And I want to go to Mr. Rawson, because this is about hospitality. We understand that French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal welcomed President Xi on the tarmac with the Chinese greeting "Ni hao," which means hello or how are you. And the president complimented Prime Minister Attal on his Chinese. What does this spontaneous exchange tell about the relationship and atmosphere and hospitality between the two sides?
I think it's interesting because the reality is it's not really a start, it's actually a continuation of dialogue. if you think about President Macron being here just a short time ago in China and in Beijing and Guangzhou, the conversation between President Xi and President Macron is one that's always been consistent. And at the top of their discussion points is always the importance of cultural exchange and tourism. And you have to really respect the fact that both countries understand the importance, as Sebastian mentioned, the importance of the economic exchange. Tourism is a big part of that. And certainly when you talk about the service industries. So I think both, there's no question that both presidents understand the importance of the exchange, not just of culture, but the idea of both French citizens visiting China, China citizens visiting France. And that's a continuation to where what was an interest pre-COVID and now post-COVID as well. And that's something that's continuing to ramp up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ms. Jin, your take on the previous 2 points, for instance, the atmosphere and the messages of such a cordial warmth towards the French people, but also something interesting about the arrangement during his itinerary here in France, where the French president has invited President Xi to visit the Pyrenees in southwestern France, where President Macron spent time with his beloved grandmother as a child. What does this arrangement mean for the personal relationship between the two leaders and for the two countries?
Actually, as we all know, there are so many successful, very close contact between President Xi Jinping and President Macron in the past visits between them. So that definitely will create more closer chemistry between them, and that's important for a mutual understanding between the two presidents. As we all know, in the past years, Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Macron has provided very strong strategic guidance in the bilateral relations and also in China-Europe relations. So that kind of close context definitely will have a kind of positive role in narrowing the gap of, recent years. There are some misperceptions there between China and Europe. So from this perspective, the closeness between the two presidents definitely will increase the mutual understanding and narrow the gap of misperceptions.
Ms. Jin, I want to stay with you. Before the tea or coffee drinking, both leaders will have already sat down to talk about the hard and potentially difficult topics on the table, both bilaterally and with the presence of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. What tops China's agenda during President Xi's visit to France this time?
I think the top agenda for Chinese side is how to correct the kind of perception of a European side toward China. Recent years, they have got a lot of confusions as the so-called partner, competitor, and the strategic rivalries. But as for our side, we continuously advocate for the strategic partners as the relationship should be the relationship between China and Europe. So this is, I think, the first concern from our side. And secondly, recent years, we also witnessed the so-called de-risking as a narrative there in Europe as regards to China-Europe economic cooperations. So we also wish there are a kind of how to say, that is, we should back to the way of the so-called win-win cooperation. We should avoid the over-politicized and securitized of economic cooperations, because China and the EU in the past economic cooperations, we have both sides benefited a lot from these kind of cooperations. And this so-called de-risking has caused a lot of uncertainties for the business circles, both here in China and in Europe. That definitely will be a bad, a kind of impact on the economic recoveries as we urgently need in today's world.
Well, we'll hear from our business representative about the potential impact of de-risking or the narrative of de-risking. But Mr. Rolland, what about the French side and the European Union side? What top their agenda, according to your understanding? Will the three leaders actually be able to expand their common ground?
Well, that is good. That is a good question, because I think that on the French side and on the European side, there's a real lack of understanding the situation. I mean, if I take the European Union in global and this understanding, the real question is European countries will become sovereign upon the influence of United States. Not that I got something against the United States as such, but the policy today, is a policy of confrontation of, as Mrs. Ling said, there is a perception of China which is not a real, which is not the reality of what China is and what China wants to do in this world. So I think that the real problem, the real issue is, are European countries going to go to win-win cooperation and not geopolitical confrontation? That is a real topic, and I think that these discussions between France and China is a way to solve the problem, because if we go back to the past of the history of France, de Gaulle was the first to recognize China as a country in '64, and so we need some sovereignty here in France to really push a policy of dialogue and to use our voice to bring the voice of this global South, because now, the world is changing from, I would say, a neo-colonial system to a system of cooperation on economic development. That's the thing that in the Schiller Institute, Mrs. Helge Zeprarush, the president of the Schiller Institute, has always defended the new Silk Road, and the Belt and Road Initiative is one of the topic, one of the project that is bringing this kind of potential for peace and development. So I think the real issue is France is going to become sovereign in a sense with European countries, and go to the South, to the global South, to be sure that we participate to this new system, this new economic system, this new architecture, which is being brought by the BRICS. That's why I think that's the main thing. Yeah.
Well, let me go to Mr. Rolland there for a take from the business perspective. Well, you are an American citizen, I understand, but what I'm going to say is, and I'm not quoting myself, because Macron said France shouldn't be a lapdog of the United States. I don't know what is your personal opinion. But he also called for European reindustrialization and green and strong economy as a basis for the sovereignty, the unity, and the strengths of Europe. Now, China is going all out on green technology, on high quality development, on real physics economy. So do you think, is China part of the solution, not part of the problem for Europe?
Well, listen, I always take a positive stance on this subject, and I think one of the most important messages that President Xi brought today was the importance of actually working much closer together towards a climate response to the climate change. There is no question that China needs to be a part of that leadership. There's no question that China has to be part of the solution globally because of its use of energy, the amount of energy that's used. So I believe that the fact that that was front and center in terms of his messaging, and that working together in terms of biodiversity protection, and because that's critical when you think about, again, tourism and cultural and tourism exchange, that has to be on the front center, because that's what tourists care about. And so climate protection, climate change is something on the front end, especially of young travelers today, the young people today, in both countries. And so therefore, both countries, as a part of leaders for the world, have to be part of this solution. And I was very, very happy to hear President Xi leading that, because we know that is a common ground for both President Macron and President Xi. And they both recognize the important nature and the stance that both countries must play.
Well, to stay with you, Mr. Rolland, and because business and economic relationship is so important, we understand that in the 60 years of diplomacy between China and France, bilateral trade has jumped 800-fold, reaching $80 billion last year, and foreign direct investment from France increased by nearly 600% in the first 2 months of this year alone. So what does the number say about the business environment here in China, for French businesses especially? Share with your own experience with your firm having over 600 hotels in China.
Yeah, thank you. And we're actually closing in now on number 700, so we're very proud of that. Listen, I think it's a validation of the fact that, you've got a couple things happening in our world. China will be the largest tourism market is expected to be the largest tourism market in the world by the year 2035. So when you look at that and you look at the preparation for that, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of the investment and the economic evolution, especially from the French companies and the French direct foreign investment into China. Many companies, ourselves, when you look at L'Oreal, when you look at a lot of the luxury brands, there is no question there is no better consumer story in the world than what you see in China today. And that will be for the future. And I think the most important thing that's happening from that standpoint is there is this, when you think about the Chinese consumer today, you think about them in their home territory, and that's what we achieve in terms of our hotels within China and the growth in tourism in China. But you also have to remember that China is also the largest outbound tourism consumer, the number of consumers traveling outbound. And so that's very important for countries around the world receiving Chinese guests. So the consumer here, it's very, very important in terms of French companies relating to the consumers domestically, so they can also continue that relationship as Chinese go outside of China as well. And that's where you see a very clear example of what you mentioned just a few moments ago for the first couple of months. The growth, no question, and that growth is going to continue. There's certainly some speed bumps along the way in terms of right-sizing the, in terms of the economy coming out of COVID, but there is no question, no one has taken their view away from the fact that by 2035, China will be the largest tourism market in the world. I think one last point, and that is, planning process is different for foreigners coming to China versus Chinese traveling abroad. Foreigners coming to China is a much longer process. And therefore, while we may not see that return of the leisure consumer yet to China as quickly as we'd like, we're seeing that corporate traveler coming back to China as quickly as you mentioned. The growth, that's what we're seeing in the growth of foreign corporate travelers coming back to China already this year.
Well, President Xi actually talked about the facilitation or the opening up of China, especially after COVID restrictions were lifted, where things are being made easier for foreign tourists, whether corporate or individual tourists. But on the other hand, he also talked about Chinese businesses going abroad, especially going to Europe. And I want to go to Ms. Jin for this question. In his newspaper article, President Xi welcomed more French companies to invest in China. He said, we'll welcome more quality French farm products and cosmetics, Mr. Rolland just mentioned that, to the Chinese market. We'll welcome investment by companies from France and other countries to China. We have fully opened up China's manufacturing sector and will move faster to expand market access to telecom, medical and other services. On the contrary, it seems that European countries are torn about what to do with Chinese investment, Ms. Jin. And this has prompted President Xi to call for a quote-unquote fair and equitable business environment for Chinese businesses. So what's the story the other way around, Ms. Jin?
Yes, recent years, as we have talked a lot about the so-called de-risking strategy the EU side has put forward, it has come out a lot of instruments to screen the Chinese investment there, and more the trade instruments have been imposed on the trade with Chinese companies. So we have heard a lot of complaints there from Chinese companies, Chinese business communities. Their business environment in Europe has been worsening recent years. So that, I think, is why Chinese side or calls for equitable business environment for Chinese companies. That is why I have said the top agenda for Chinese side is that we should be back to the kind of win-win cooperation that's not only for the trade cooperation but also for investment cooperation. We are firmly against the so-called security concerns as regards to the business corporations.
Yeah. Well, this is very interesting, Ms. Jin. Let me stay with you. Look, so many French businesses, foreign business in China, the jump of 600% of French investment in China. And China seems not to be worried about national security or protecting Chinese domestic businesses. But it seems that on the European side or on the American side as well, they have this worry. Ms. Jin first and then Mr. Rolland.
Yes, I think that is because of the unprecedented changes recent years with the rising of the so-called geopolitical tensions. From EU side, I partly understand their worries and concerns as regards to the vulnerabilities of interdependence because of the COVID-19, because of the trade war launched by the former Trump administration, etc., etc. But we shouldn't, to spill all of these kind of impacts on the economic corporations, the kind of normal business ties that should be highly politicized and securitized. So we how to have a kind of a balance there between the so-called their reasonable concerns as regards to over interdependence and the normal business, or in other words, we should have a very clear, distinction between the real security concerns and the politicized, to some extent, a kind of weaponized the trade and investment in the kind of corporations to leverage more. So that is the current situation European political leaders are facing, because actually they have faced a lot of hurdles from the business communities. I still remember last year when I visited Germany.
Let me go to Mr. Rolland. Let me go to Mr. Rolland for his take on the same question. Wouldn't it be reciprocal? Wouldn't it be good for Chinese businesses to receive a reciprocal treatment like foreign businesses in China?
Well, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of every business, but I can say this. When you look at even our own partners here in China, our partners are doing business overseas in Europe and America. When you look at Xinjiang, when you look at Huazhu, even when you look at online travel agencies like Ctrip or Trip.com, everybody is enjoying a healthy environment around the world. And that I think it's a sign of mutual respect, certainly in the world of culture and tourism, that you do see, because it is a common language. And I realize I present an upbeat approach of this, but that is, when you think about, there are some great things in the world that has common thread and that bonds people. Travel and tourism is one of those. And that's something that you can enjoy globally and is fostered globally. And so whether it's a company like Accor, largest hotel company, European hotel company, or you have Chinese hotel companies or travel companies, everyone is mutually having that same opportunity and seeing that relevance today. Again, as I mentioned, on a global basis.
Yeah. Let me go to Mr. Rolland there. French President Macron talks about strategic autonomy or sovereignty of Europe. President Xi talks about the importance for one to think for oneself. Do you think European countries are approaching China independently, or are they allowing themselves to be guided by other forces, or are they somewhere in between?
Well, I think they are, in a sense, guided by the global situation and what the United States wants the European Union to do about China and also about Russia. I think we have to be very stark on that. So, and I think it's a huge problem because as we as we've said already, China is participating for many years for 30% of the growth of the world market and the world economy. So I think that this question of de-risking is the real risk is to go without China. And now the problem is that, China is when you're thinking in terms of hegemony and geopolitical terms, China has become a rival for United States, for the Western and financial institutions. And I think, on the contrary, we should see China and the BRICS country as an opportunity to bring growth everywhere and in every countries. And I think Africa has a huge future, a very nice future by the cooperation with China and other countries. So I think that they are guided by this kind of policy, and we need a change of the policy right now.
Mr. de Rochon, France has the tradition of pursuing what is right according to its own judgment, like General Charles de Gaulle did 60 years ago when he decided to establish diplomatic relations with New China, despite the Cold War that was raging. What has been the benefit of increased economic relations and political trust with China over the past few years for the ordinary French people?
Well, that is a real good question, because I think that it has been. I think it's very important to understand that in France, China is not quite understood, and because of the media, some of the medias and some of the narratives.
But you have more French food
China
being exported to China, for instance.
Yeah.
Are people aware? Are the farmers aware that they're selling to China, and the exports are jumping even despite the declining, slight fluctuation of overall trade?
Yeah, but we have a great luck. It's on the food, but also I think that on the question of culture, between China and France, very huge potential of very good dialogue, very constructive and very flourishing dialogue. And I think that we have a luck that Xi Jinping is one of the president who loves, French culture, is always quoting Victor Hugo and other, as you say, Romain Rolland, big authors, French authors. And it's very important to have this kind of, cultural dialogue, which is sometimes lacking because of languages, because of different kind of misunderstanding. And we have a huge potential of cooperation. Yesterday I was in Paris to a big forum on the question of dialogue between young people and working on this question of modernization of China and how we have to look at the Chinese modernization. And a lot of young French people want to go to China just to understand what's happening in China, because we don't really understand it in France.
We have to leave it there. Lots of hope, despite lots of disagreement and problems. Lots of hope there. Thanks to Sébastien de Rochon, Gary Rossen, and Jing Ling for your important insights. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, on President Xi Jinping's visit to Europe. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got The Point.